All right, everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to look at some of the most important metrics that make a SaaS business work. And I'm not talking about some boring spreadsheet. We're talking about like the pulse of a SaaS business.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. A lot of times we get lost in the weeds of, all the features and new marketing tactics and all that, but we forget
Yes.
about like what really makes a SaaS business healthy and sustainable.
Right. And one of the things that can really sink a SaaS business is churn.
Hmm.
So imagine you're putting all this effort into getting all these new customers, but then they just leave as fast as you can get them. It's like trying to fill up a bathtub with the drain open.
Yeah, and that's churn, and it's super important to understand why it happens. When we talk about churn, it really comes down to how many customers you're losing. But it's not just one number. There's actually two different types of churn. You've got customer churn, which is straightforward. It's the percentage of customers who decide to leave. And then you've got revenue churn, and that looks at how much recurring revenue you're losing. So you can imagine like a few high-paying customers could leave, and that would really tank your revenue churn, even though your overall customer churn number might look pretty good. So it's super important to keep an eye on both of those numbers. Now, why do customers churn in the first place? Well, there's a bunch of different reasons, but some of the biggest culprits are when they just don't see the value in your product. They're not getting enough bang for their buck. Or maybe they had a bad onboarding experience, so they felt lost and confused. Or the customer support was just terrible, and they felt like they were on their own. But the good news is, you can fight churn. It's not this unavoidable thing. The first step is figuring out why it's happening. And the best way to do that is to just go straight to the source. Talk to your customers. You can use surveys or track your net promoter score and really dig into how people are actually using your product. That can give you a ton of insight into what's working and what's not. Once you know why people are churning, you can start putting strategies in place to fix those problems. So let's say your data shows that people are dropping off like right after the free trial ends. That might mean there's a problem with your onboarding process. Maybe it's too complicated, or people just aren't getting enough guidance to really see the value in your product. In that case, you could try making your onboarding process simpler, or creating some interactive tutorials, or even being more proactive with customer success to help guide people through those early stages. Or let's say you're seeing a lot of churn because customers are switching to a competitor, and that competitor has a specific feature that you don't have. Well, then it's time to seriously think about adding that feature to your roadmap. Because remember, even reducing your churn rate by just a little bit can have a huge impact on your bottom line. It's all about plugging those leaks and making sure that the customers you worked so hard to get actually stick around.
I love how you explain churn and why it's so important for SaaS companies. Now let's talk about another critical metric, customer acquisition cost, or CAC for short. This is all about figuring out how much it costs you to bring in each new customer.
It's amazing to me how many startups focus on vanity metrics like website traffic or social media followers, but they completely forget about their CAC. And that can be a huge mistake, because the reality is, getting new customers costs money. You have to invest in marketing and sales, maybe even offer free trials or discounts, and that's all part of the game. But what really separates the successful size businesses from the ones that struggle is their ability to acquire customers efficiently. Think about it like this. If you're spending like $500 to get a new customer, but that customer only ends up spending $200 with your company over their lifetime, you're basically losing money on every new customer you bring in. It's like pouring water into a leaky bucket. No matter how much water you pour in, it's never going to fill up. So how do you calculate your CAC? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward. You take your total sales and marketing costs over a certain period, like a month or a quarter, and then you divide that by the number of new customers you got during that same period. So let's say you spent $10,000 on marketing and sales last month, and you got 50 new customers. Your CAC would be $200. Now, you might be thinking, oh, okay, I get it. I need to keep my CAC low. But how low is low enough? And that's a great question. There's no magic number that works for everyone. It depends on things like your industry, your target market, your pricing strategy, your whole business model, really. But here's a good rule of thumb. Your CAC should be way lower than your customer lifetime value. I'll dive into that a little bit later. But the main thing to remember is that you want to make sure you're making more money from your customers than you're spending to get them. Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up for a really tough time. So how do you actually optimize your CAC? Well, one of the most effective strategies is to focus on getting high-quality leads. You want to make sure that the people you're reaching out to are actually interested in your product and have a good chance of becoming paying customers. So you need to be really clear about who your ideal customer is and make sure your messaging resonates with that specific audience. So imagine you're selling project management software that's specifically designed for software development teams. if you're marketing to everyone. Like marketing teams or small businesses in general, you're probably wasting a lot of time and money. Your messaging needs to be laser focused on the problems and needs of software development teams, and you should be marketing in the places where those teams hang out. Another key strategy for optimizing your CAC is to streamline your sales funnel. The smoother your sales process is, the less it'll cost you to get new customers. This might involve automating some tasks or implementing a lead scoring system to figure out which prospects are most likely to buy, or just making sure your sales team has the tools and training they need to close deals quickly and effectively. It's all about getting rid of friction, reducing wasted effort, and guiding potential customers smoothly from that initial point of awareness all the way to becoming loyal paying customers. And remember, optimizing your CAC isn't a one-time thing, it's an ongoing process. You need to keep track of your metrics, find areas where you can improve, and keep tweaking your approach to make sure you're getting customers as efficiently as possible.
That was an awesome breakdown of CAC. Understanding how much it costs to get a customer and how to optimize it is crucial for anyone in the SaaS world. And we've got a lot more to unpack, so we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. Welcome back. We just talked about churn and CAC, those two really important metrics in the SaaS world. But now let's talk about the metric that really gets SaaS founders excited, customer lifetime value, or LTV.
You know, in the startup world, it's so easy to get caught up in short-term wins, those quick little bursts of excitement. But the real key to a successful and sustainable SaaS business is figuring out and then maximizing the lifetime value of your customers. Acquiring a new customer is just the beginning. The real journey, the real opportunity for growth comes from building that relationship and squeezing out as much value as possible over that customer's entire life cycle. When we talk about LTV, we're really talking about the total revenue you can expect to get from a single customer, from the moment they sign up to the moment they say goodbye. It's like a crystal ball that shows you the long-term value each customer brings to the table. Why is this so important? Well, understanding LTV tells you how much you can afford to spend getting new customers. It helps you figure out your pricing, and it gives you a roadmap for making smart decisions about keeping customers happy, upselling and cross-selling, all those good things. So how do we figure out this LTV thing? The formula is actually pretty simple. LTV is just your average revenue per user, or ARPU, multiplied by the average customer lifetime. ARPU is how much money you make from each customer on average every month or year. And customer lifetime is pretty self-explanatory. It's the average amount of time a customer sticks around. Let's look at a real-world example. Let's say your sinus product brings in $100 per month per customer, and the average customer stays with you for 24 months. Your LTV would be $2,400. That's the potential revenue you could make from each customer over those 2 years. Now, remember those two types of churn we talked about earlier? Customer churn and revenue churn? Well, they have a big impact on your LTV too. A high churn rate, whether it's customer churn or revenue churn, is going to drag your LTV down. It's like having a bucket with holes in it. If you're losing customers or revenue too quickly, it's going to be really hard to fill that bucket up. So how do we plug those holes and max out our LTV? Here are a few things to keep in mind. First things first, focus on giving your customers amazing value through your product. It sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how many companies forget about this. You need to constantly get feedback from your customers, look at how they're using your product, and keep making improvements to make sure it meets their needs. When customers feel like they're getting their money's worth, they're way more likely to stay with you. Next, prioritize customer success. This isn't just about reacting when someone has a problem. It's about proactively helping your customers achieve their goals with your product. Make your onboarding process smooth and easy. Offer personalized training and support, and build a community around your product where customers can connect and learn from each other. Remember, a happy and successful customer is way more likely to stick around and become an advocate for your brand. And speaking of advocates, don't underestimate the power of upselling and cross-selling. As your customers get more familiar with your product and see its value, find opportunities to introduce them to higher tier plans or additional features, things that can make their experience even better and help you grow your revenue. Think of it like a tree. When you plant a tree, you don't expect it to just stay the same size forever. You nurture it, you prune it, you give it what it needs to grow big and strong. And you should treat your customer relationships the same way.
Maximizing LTV can really change the game for SaaS businesses.
Yeah.
By understanding the long-term value of a customer, you can make strategic decisions that fuel growth and build a company that lasts. And speaking of strategic decisions, there's one more important piece of the puzzle we need to talk about: the LTV to CAC ratio. This ratio gives you a really good snapshot of how efficient your customer acquisition efforts are.
One of the most common questions I get from SaaS founders is, how much should I be spending to acquire a customer? And the answer, as with most things in business, is it depends. But the LTV to CAC ratio gives you a solid framework for making those decisions. It basically compares the lifetime value you expect to get from a customer to the cost of getting them in the first place. A good LTV to CAC ratio means that you're spending your marketing and sales budget wisely and that you're getting a positive return on your investment. So what's a good ratio? A good rule of thumb is to shoot for a 3-to-1 ratio. This means that the lifetime value of your customers should be 3 times higher than the cost of acquiring them. Imagine you're a farmer planting apple trees. If it costs you $10 to plant a tree, and that tree produces $30 worth of apples over its lifetime, you've got a healthy 3-to-1 ratio. You're making a profit, and your orchard is thriving. But if the cost of planting a tree goes up to $20, and you're still only getting $30 worth of apples, your ratio drops to 1.5 to 1, and suddenly your profit margins shrink, and your orchard might not be so sustainable anymore. The same thing applies to SaaS businesses. A healthy LTV to CAC ratio tells you that you're getting customers efficiently and making a sustainable profit. But a low ratio could mean that you're spending too much on acquisition, or that your churn rate is too high and eating away at your potential profits. Now here's where things get interesting. The ideal LTV to CAC ratio can change depending on a bunch of different factors, like your industry, your business model, how far along you are in your growth stage, and overall business goals. Early stage startups, for example, often focus on growing really fast, even if it means having a lower LTV to CAC ratio in the beginning. They're all about grabbing market share and building momentum, knowing that they can fine-tune things and improve their profitability later on as they mature. On the other hand, established SaaS companies that already have a proven business model might prioritize profitability over rapid growth. They might aim for a higher LTV to CAC ratio to really maximize their returns on those marketing and sales investments. The key is to find that sweet spot that aligns with your specific goals and allows you to build a SaaS business that is both profitable and built to last. So how do you optimize your LTV to CAC ratio? Well, one really effective strategy is to focus on reducing churn like we discussed earlier. Remember, a high churn rate can seriously hurt both your LTV and your LTV to CAC ratio. By putting strategies in place to improve customer retention, you can boost your LTV and improve that ratio, even if your CAC stays the same. Another powerful strategy is to optimize your pricing. Are you charging enough for your product? Are your pricing tiers set up in a way that encourages upgrades and maximizes customer lifetime value? By taking a close look at your pricing and making strategic adjustments, you can increase your ARPU and give your LTV a nice little boost. And finally, don't forget about the importance of making sure your marketing and sales teams are on the same page. When those two teams are working together smoothly, you can attract better quality leads, streamline your sales process, and ultimately lower your CAC. Just remember, optimizing your LTV to CAC ratio is a continuous process. You need to constantly monitor your metrics, analyze the data, and be willing to adapt as your business grows. But by paying close attention to this crucial metric, you can build a SaaS business that's not only profitable, but also built for the long haul.
That was an awesome explanation of the LTV to CAC ratio. I love how you use the orchard analogy to make it so clear. We'll be right back after a quick message from our sponsors. Welcome back to the show. We've been digging deep into the metrics that really drive success in the SaaS world. We talked about churn, CAC LTV, and that super important LTV to CAC ratio. But as we wrap things up, I want to kind of shift gears for a minute and talk about something that sometimes gets lost in all the data, the human element.
You know, it's funny how we can get so focused on dashboards and numbers that we forget there are actual people behind all those metrics, real people with real needs and frustrations and goals. And that's something we can't afford to lose sight of. Because in the end, SaaS isn't just about algorithms and automation. It's about building products and experiences that solve real problems for real people. And that takes empathy. It takes a deep understanding of your customers, their needs, their pain points, what makes them tick. Think of it like this. Every churn number is a person who decided your product just wasn't right for them anymore. Every CAC calculation represents the resources you spent trying to convince someone to give your product a shot. And every LTV figure tells a story about a customer's journey with your company.
Yeah, that's a great point about remembering the people behind the numbers. But how can we go beyond just remembering and actually build stronger relationships with our customers?
You know, in the digital world, it's so easy to start treating our customers like data points instead of individuals. But real strong relationships are built on connection, understanding, trust, and that means going beyond just transactions. Reach out to your customers proactively, not just when they're having a problem or when you're trying to sell them something. Celebrate their wins, offer support when they're going through tough times, and just engage with them on a personal level. Use your different communication channels, email, social media, in-app messaging to share valuable content, helpful tips, and just check in and see how they're doing. And don't be afraid to show some personality. Let your customers see the human side of your brand. Share some behind the scenes stuff about your company culture. Highlight your team members. Tell stories that connect with your audience. People want to do business with people they know, like, and trust, and that trust comes from real connections and shared values.
I love that. Advice building strong relationships is so important. But let's not forget about the human element inside our own teams, too. How can we build a company culture that really puts empathy and the customer first?
It's interesting how much we talk about building a customer-centric culture, but we sometimes forget that it all starts internally. We need to treat our employees with the same care, respect, and empathy that we want them to show our customers. Empower your team members to make decisions that benefit the customer, even if it means bending the rules a little. Encourage open communication, feedback, and collaboration across different departments. Celebrate wins together and learn from mistakes as a team. And most importantly, lead by example. Show your team that you truly care about your customers and that you value their feedback and you're actually going to do something with it. Remember, a happy and engaged team is going to create happier customers, and that leads to better results all around, lower churn, higher LTV, and a more sustainable and successful business.
That's such a crucial point about building that internal culture of empathy. It really does have a ripple effect. It impacts everything your business does. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this one key takeaway. While data is super important for making good decisions in the SaaS world, we can never forget about the human element. It's all about finding that balance between data-driven insights and human-centered strategies. So as you continue on your SaaS journey, always keep the human element in mind. Listen to your customers, build real relationships, empower your team, and don't underestimate the power of empathy, because at the end of the day, it's the connections we make and the experiences we create that truly matter. And that's a wrap on our deep dive into the exciting world of SaaS metrics. We hope you learned some valuable stuff, picked up some practical tips, and walked away with a renewed appreciation for the human side of this industry. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the amazing world of SaaS.